A black SUV cut through a puddle and threw a wall of brown water straight into an old woman's face, and the driver laughed like the world belonged to her. Have you ever watched something cruel unfold 3 feet away and felt that burn in your chest that says do something before it decides who you are? If it were you right there in that rain, what would you have done? It was that slow kind of storm that hangs around all afternoon. The market smelled like wet cardboard and tomatoes, nylon tarps, snapping kids hopping over potholes like it was recess. And I was at the front of Greenbasket Mart with my apron tied too tight. Because I like things neat, stacking rice bags, saying hi to people I know, by the sound of their footsteps, when the SUV rolled in like it owned the street, hit a puddle like it meant to, and that wave smacked the woman sitting under a half-broken umbrella, soaked her hair, blouse, skin, the shock catching in her throat. So the only sound she made was a little gasp that felt louder than traffic. The tinted window slid down, a girl with heavy makeup and a diamond grin leaned out and said, "Why are you sitting there like it's your village? Dirty things belong in dirty places, then." The window went up, the engine purred, and she was gone like she'd done public service. People stared, people muttered, but nobody moved. And I don't know what broke me loose first, maybe the way the old woman blinked slow and wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, maybe my mother's voice in my head saying, "If kindness is easy, you waited too long." So I grabbed a bottle of water, and the cleanest handkerchief I owned crossed the road, through the drizzle, knelt on wet concrete and said, "Mama, let me help you." I wiped mud from her eyelashes and chin, straightened her scarf, pressed the water into her hands, and when she tried to push away the taxi money, I folded her fingers around it and smiled. Please, it would make me happy. Her hand trembled, not from cold, from something older, and she whispered, "Thank you, my daughter," voice thin but steady, and I held her elbow while she sat up taller, and I swear the whole market exhaled, even the tarps, even the rain. "If only I had a daughter-in-law like that," she murmured, soft enough to pretend I didn't hear. "But you know how some words stick to you, like warm bread." Yeah, that happened. Pattern interrupt. Here's the part you didn't see coming. The woman with muddy cheeks did not take a bus home. She had a driver who scolded her at the gate for slipping out alone, guards who knew her favorite tea floors that shine even when the lights are off, and a son the city calls the quiet billionaire. Her name was Madame Gladys, and the man headlines argue about at brunch, that was her boy Derek. She likes to walk the city dressed down, no jewelry, no name, watching how people act when they think nobody important is watching. Because if kindness needs an audience, it isn't kindness, it's theater. And she'd learned to trust what people do when they believe no one will remember. Back at the store, the bell chimed, and a man came in wearing a plain white shirt and a face that didn't demand attention. Some men wear money like a flashing sign, and some wear it like a secret. He asked for a cold bottle of water, tea to turn to go, and I noticed his change still sitting there. So I hurried after him. "Sir." "Your change," I said, holding it out with both hands, "because that's how my grandmother taught me to respect someone's work. Most people wouldn't bother," he said with a smile that lived more in the eyes than the mouth. "It's not mine," I told him. "You earned it," and he nodded, and slipped into the rain like he belonged more to sidewalks than to headlines. He didn't tell me his last name, I didn't tell him mine, it felt clean that way. Hold that thought about the girl in the SUV. Bianca. She lives like a camera is always on, captions like, "Boss Queen, only the strong shine," that brand of confidence that feeds on applause and dies in silence. She was Derek's girlfriend, then the kind of match that looks perfect on paper and feels like sand in your shoe. The very next day at our store door, she bumped into the same old woman, wrinkled her nose and said, "Not you again, still walking around smelling like gutter water." Voice loud, perfume sharp, cruelty casual. I walked out from behind the counter before my feet finished asking permission. "Excuse me," I said, breath steady even while my blood wasn't. "You don't speak to her like that." She laughed. Look at that. The salesgirl with an attitude of coarse filth sticks together, then tossed her hair and tried to float past. Being rich doesn't make you better. I told her insulting the elderly doesn't make you bold. It makes you empty. That wiped her shine for a second. But pride doesn't learn quietly. It just gets louder, and she left a trail of perfume like smoke. Across town, candles were being set at the Okoye mansion. A long table silverware that catches chandeliers, and Derek straightened his tie and told his mother he wanted to introduce someone, a fiancé. He said her name was Bianca, and the door opened, and a red dress shimmered in, and diamonds laughed on a collarbone, and she froze because at the head of the table sat the face she'd splashed with mud and mocked again at the mart. "Oh, we've met," Madame Gladys said, voice calm enough to cut glass twice, and she told the story, like a weather report, puddle insult, store door, poverty stench, and let the silence finish the rest. Derek listened, not like men who hunt for exits while you talk. He listened like he was setting a weight down. I can't build a life with someone who wears beauty on the outside and pride like poison, he said quietly. And that should have been the end for Bianca. Door closed, lesson learned, move on. But pride, like I said, reaches for gasoline. A day later, the bell chimed, and Madame Gladys stepped into my aisle with a crisp scarf, and that Sunday morning calm. She handed me a little note with an address and time written in neat letters. "Come visit me," she said. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." And on my day off, I took a taxi down a road lined with flowering trees, walked through a black gate that whispered old money, heart drumming a little too loud, and the door opened, and there he was, the water guy, smiling, like he'd been caught by the same coincidence I had. "You," I said, "because sometimes the shortest words are the only safe ones. You live here." And he laughed. "Yeah, this is my home." And we both laughed because when the world makes a circle around you, the only thing left to do is admire the geometry. Dinner was simple stew at a polished table conversation, easy, the kind of easy that makes food taste better. And I noticed the way Derek leaned in when I spoke, not to grab the thread, just to sit closer to it, and how his mother watched with a small smile that doesn't own a moment. It blesses it. We walked the garden afterward, and truth started knocking on my ribs. Pattern interrupt. Time for the twist that flips the room. My name is Emily Johnson. In certain neighborhoods, that last name pulls doors off their hinges. My father is Chief Williams Johnson. My mother is a diplomat. And if I say all that out loud in the wrong space, I stop being a person and become an asset. So 2 years ago, I closed the door on that loud life, cut my cards, packed a small bag, and moved where nobody bowed in the hallway, took a job at a supermarket where my value was in the way I showed up when the bell chimed, not in what my last name buys. I didn't tell Derek yet. Not because I wanted to trick him, because I wanted to meet him without the noise. You know what I mean. When you want someone to love the part of you that money can't buy. He didn't tell me his last name either. He was just Derek, the man who somehow kept forgetting to buy water in bulk, so he had a reason to stop by the one who walked me home after shifts, like the city was softer when we moved through it together. Who listened more than he spoke and laughed at the jokes you whisper, because you don't want them to get away. Those walks turned into the quiet kind of intimacy people underestimate. We talked about noise and power and how some rooms chase applause like oxygen. How some people want a partner who shines for the world, and some want a partner who quiets the heart. And when he said sometimes you meet someone who checks every box and leaves you cold, sometimes you meet someone who makes the air feel easier, I pretended I didn't understand, even while every cell in me did. Mini call to action time, because you and I are in this together now. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. And I want your take in the comments. Would you have told him your last name right then or waited like I did? Be honest. Bianca didn't slip away, she watched. And when a blurry photo of Derek and me walking out of a cafe hit a gossip page, her chest lit up with that wildfire. People keep mistaking for power, she made a call. You only make when you think the world owes you a correction, asked for something done quietly, that only looks quiet if you can't hear what a life sounds like when you tear it. One evening after my shift, I turned the key on my apartment door and heard footsteps quicken, two men with casual voices and hard hands, a cloth pressed over my mouth that smelled like chemicals, and sleep darkness moving in from the edges like fog. And when I woke, my wrists were tied, my ankles raw, my mouth dry, and the room smelled like kerosene and old wood railway tracks humming somewhere outside like a warning that didn't know where else to go. She stepped out of the shadows, wearing sunglasses inside. Like light was her enemy perfume, trying to fight gasoline, voice sweet, the way poison can be sweet. "Goodbye, little supermarket girl," she said. And I said a prayer with my teeth clenched, because panic is fast and stupid, and faith is slow and stubborn, and I wanted the slow thing. I wanted one more hour, one more door, one more person who loves me following the sound of my name. Across town, Derek's phone buzzed with a link that cracked my secret open. Breaking: Chief Williams offers reward for safe return of missing daughter. My picture. My name and whatever breath he had left was gone when an old fruit vendor told him he'd seen men shove me into a black car near my street. Said they carried fuel into the old warehouse by the rails. Said he didn't want the reward. He wanted me safe because I once bought all his fruit when his wife was sick, paid more than he asked. That's the kind of receipt kindness keeps for moments like this. He called the police, but he didn't wait. There are minutes when following the rules is a luxury you cannot afford. He drove like the road belonged to what we were trying to save. Kicked the rusted door, and heat slammed him back, shouted my name, and the sound found me where I was tied. He pulled at the knots until his knuckles went white, dragged the chair backward when the rope fought too hard, swore once and then said sorry to the air, like the fire was keeping score, and we ran crooked through stacks of crates while sparks fell like angry stars. We burst into damp grass, and he laid me down and held my face with both hands, and I said, "You came because 4 words can be a life raft." And he said, "I'll always come," and for once I believed a promise without making it audition. "I'm Emily Johnson." I told him when my voice felt like it belonged to me again. "I'm not just a clerk," and he laughed that soft laugh. "I know I saw the headline, but I saw you before I saw your name." Then he brushed soot from my cheek and said, "I'm Derek Okoye," and I laughed, because of course he was the man who hates noise more than crowds. Love it, the one who drinks more bottled water than any human should. Yeah, that happened. Police sirens cut the night into slices. Investigators did what investigators do: phone records, transfers, messages that said too much, and 3 knocks hit Bianca's door like a sentence. A warrant held up like a mirror that shows you the face you've been avoiding. You're under arrest for kidnapping and attempted murder. And in that moment, and all the captions in the world couldn't convince anybody that a heart that laughs at a beggar and lights a match for a rival deserves to lead someone else's life. Do you think that's fair? Do you think losing your freedom for trying to steal someone else's is justice, or just the start of it? Say it out loud, because I want the argument, the friction, where truth gets warm enough to bend. I went home to my parents after, not because I needed marble and chandeliers to feel safe, because I needed my mother's hands on my face and my father's voice saying my full name like it was a door I could walk through, and we sat in the garden and breathed simple as that, and the house didn't swallow me like it used to. Maybe I'd learned to take up room without apologizing. Maybe walls can't move you if your feet are planted in what you believe. We visited Madame Gladys the next day, sat in her quiet yard, where even the breeze seems well-mannered, and she held my hand and said, "Truth finds its way out, so does love." And I wanted to put that on a wall, not as a quote, as a map. As for Derek and me, we didn't sprint to an altar. Because a headline told us to, we learned how to be still in a room without needing the room to clap. We learned that power looks different when it carries groceries to a car than when it clears a restaurant. We learned that when it rains, we steer around puddles on purpose, not because our paint is special, because dignity shouldn't be splashed by a careless wheel. We also learned to answer questions we used to dodge. When do you say your last name? When do you hide it? Is secrecy smart or selfish? Is testing a person in disguise wise or manipulative? Tell me, because I can hear both sides. Is a mother wrong for moving through the city, dressed like someone the world ignores just to see who her son is bringing home? Or is she the only one doing the hard work everyone else avoids? Here's a messier question, and I want your gut, not your polished answer. Should forgiveness be available to someone like Bianca if she asks for it with more than words? If she does the slow work of pulling the poison out, instead of just apologizing for the taste? Or do some doors stay locked for good when you choose to light a match? I don't know if there's a clean answer, I just know. We don't fix pride by pretending it isn't hungry. If it were you, would you want your worst act to live forever in the first line of your story, or would you fight for a second chapter? And if you would fight for yours, how do you feel when someone else fights for theirs? I go back to the market sometimes, not for nostalgia, for calibration. I like the way prices are loud and kindness is quiet. I like how tomatoes roll when someone drops a basket and three strangers bend down at once without looking around to see who's filming. I like that the bell over the store door still squeaks, and when I pass that corner, I see the splash again, the insult, the handkerchief, the taxi money, and I remember that identity isn't a suit you wear. It's a decision you make when there's nothing in it for you. Would you have stepped forward in the rain? Would you have said something at the door when a voice with diamonds mocked a woman with wrinkles? Would you have told the truth at the garden table when your secret was safe and your heart wasn't? We rapped with sirens and handcuffs, and for some of you, that's the perfect last note. Justice lights done for others. It opens a bigger door. Who gets compassion? Who gets consequence? Who gets both? Who decides? And how do we build a city where respect is the default even when nobody's watching? I don't have it all figured out. I just know I don't want to live in a place where puddles are weapons and apologies are luxuries. If this story hit you anywhere you weren't ready, tell me where. Drop a comment with the moment you would have acted or the line you would have said. Tell me if testing love in disguise is brilliant or brutal. Tell me if hiding your last name is honest or manipulative. Tell me if you've been the one with mud on your face or the one holding the handkerchief, because those are different kinds of courage, and I want to hear both. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that character matters when the lights are off. Hit like if you believe the only crown worth chasing is kindness. Subscribe if you want more stories, told the way life actually feels. Messy, brave a little bit, broken somehow, still beautiful. Now it's your turn. Be loud in the comments, be real, and answer the question. All of this comes down to, if it were you, what would you have done?